Our next panel, Grabbing the Rings, Lessons from Paris and the Road to LA. Moderated by our own Deputy Program Director, LJ Holmgren. Panelists, Jackie Dubrovich, Columbia College, class of 2016, but probably now a little bit better known for the gold medal that she's wearing, won at the Paris Games. Rob McQueen, VP of Global Sponsorship at Cisco. Mark Riccio, the CEO of USA Lacrosse. And Eli Velasquez, an Emmy Award-winning sports media executive. Please join me in welcoming them all to the stage.
Thank you, Scott. Today, our panelists represent diverse perspectives from a Columbia alumna and gold medalist to a leader of a national governing body, a brand, a corporate partner, and representative from the media. Together, they'll share their journeys, insights, and experiences, providing behind-the-scenes look at the world of the Olympic and Paralympic movement. Throughout the panel, we'll discuss topics such as the financial impact of the Games on the athletes, the challenges and rewards of representing your own country, and the role of brands and media supporting athletes and the road to the 2028 Los Angeles Games. So let's dive in and introduce our panelists today. Jackie Dubrovich, a former captain of the Columbia fencing team, led her team to 2 consecutive NCAA national championships. Now she returns to campus for the first time in a while with that gold medal around her neck after representing Team USA fencing in Tokyo and Paris, culminating in fencing's first team gold medal in history. Yeah. Mark Riccio, CEO of USA Lacrosse, a sport that is returning to the 2028 Los Angeles Games. In the past, Mark has highlighted the reasons why lacrosse becoming an Olympic sport in LA 28 matters. It's due to visibility, accessibility, investment, and fun. Today, he will take us through how lacrosse got here and what the sport will look like in 2028. Rob, well, yeah, we can clap for him too, sure. Rob McQueen, VP of Global Sponsorship at Cisco, where they provide networking technology and solutions for the Games. Since 2012, Cisco has served as an official partner of several editions of the Olympic and Paralympic Games, connecting and protecting athletes, fans, and stakeholders in London, Rio, Tokyo, and Paris. Next up, LA 28, they'll serve as the official network equipment partner. I like that we clap for everyone. And last, Eli Velasquez, an Emmy Award-winning sports media executive. Eli was a driver of Telemundo's migration of viewers to Telemundo channels, regardless of languages spoken, and overall growth for the Olympics and Paralympics for NBC. Thank you all for joining us today. So to start, I'd like to start with you, Jackie. Tell us about your journey to the Olympics.
Yeah, so I started fencing when I was 8 years old, so it's been a long 22-year journey. I was at Columbia between 2012 2016. I was a 2-time captain. We won 2 NCAA championships in 2015 and 2016. And then I decided after I graduated in 2016 to continue fencing. And we can get into kind of the details of that later. But so I initially was training and working full-time as an athlete. So I was working a typical corporate job, 9 to 6, running to practice, competing, traveling all over the world, trying to make the senior national team. I was able to make Tokyo. And in Tokyo, that was the infamous COVID Olympics. So it was a very interesting Olympics. It wasn't the Olympics of my dreams, just given the circumstances. And so I made the decision to keep fencing after that. And the 3 years in between the Tokyo and Paris Olympics, I continued working. I took about a year and a half off of my corporate career. I wanted to give myself the best opportunity possible to do well in Paris. And it paid off, and I'm very happy with that decision. And so, yeah, now I'm here after Paris, and we won a historic, it's the first time, either men or women, for Team USA fencing, we brought back the gold medal for the US. So it was a really amazing Thank you. So it was incredible and life-changing.
Thank you, Jackie. As you can tell, they love that. Mark, can you tell us lacrosse's journey back to the games and what the International Olympic Committee is looking for with format changes and updates for the sport?
Sure. So that process started about 10 years ago, and it started with our International Federation of World Lacrosse working with the International Olympic Committee to become recognized, to grow the game globally, to ensure that there was globality around competition of the sport. But what's also interesting is actually lacrosse was in the Olympics back in the 1930s. Men only, not women. So LA 28 will be the return of the men's discipline, and it'll be the first time for the women. But what's also interesting about lacrosse is its origin story. It's actually the oldest sport in North America, and the origin story of lacrosse is that it was gifted to the Native Americans from the creator, and the Native Americans shared it with the rest of the world. So there's great spiritual history in the game of lacrosse, and that is something that LA 28 certainly was looking for. That's something that the IOC was looking for. So our pathway came down to changing the discipline for the Olympics into sixes, which is 6-on-6. That's a strategy comparable to rugby and the rugby sevens. And there's lots of logistical reasons, commercial reasons why going to a smaller discipline is a better fit for the Olympic Games in terms of athlete count, duration of the game, carbon footprint. These are all the things that the IOC and LA 28 looks for when they're deciding on what new sports get into the Olympics. But also commercial relevancy. Can we put more people into the stands? Lacrosse has a strong collegiate environment, now a strong pro system. So the thinking was, hey, these people can draw eyeballs on NBC. They can draw ticket sales and attendance. And that all goes into the mix in terms of lacrosse's journey into the Olympics.
Amazing, thank you. Jackie, I'd like to go back to your story and dig a little deeper here as we have a national governing body and then also obviously an athlete. Let's talk about athletes becoming brands. What's the financial impact of the games on athletes?
Yeah, so I can speak firstly from my personal experience. And so fencing is a pretty niche sport in this country. You know, there is a high attrition rate after college. We lose a lot of our athletes in the US because there's no professional fencing pathway. A lot of people choose to further their career, their professional career over their athletic ambitions. And so for me, I knew that there had to be life after sport. And so for me, it was very important to develop myself professionally while simultaneously also balancing, you know, the rigorous training and competing schedule that comes with fencing. It's very tricky. You know, I took 1.5 years off before Paris, and that took a lot of time to make that decision because I had to think about the financial implications of such a decision. We don't get paid much as fencers in this country, and because it's a relatively niche sport, the sponsorship opportunities are not very vast. There are some, and fencing has definitely picked up momentum, but there's not too many pathways to making money in the sport, or at least a livable income. And so what's interesting about the push for branding is we were actually had our White House visit last weekend, and so Team USA is invited to go to the White House, meet the president, and they do a summit for us. And a major initiative and major push that they had was for us as athletes to become content creators and our own brands. And that's supposed to be a way of us making an income as athletes. And for some of us, that isn't very natural, myself included. I don't consider myself a content creator. I don't really want to brand myself. And so there's that tension, right? How do you make money doing the sport that you love, representing Team USA, but also making a livable income?
Thank you.
Jackie, what is your degree is in what are you trying to do professionally in business, if it is a business degree?
Yeah, so I did my undergrad here at Columbia, and I was going to go to law school, actually. So that was my plan after graduation. But then I was, you know, people told me that they knew that I could make the Olympic team, and that it would be a shame if my talent was lost and I just moved to the professional world. And so I was working in ad tech historically ever since I graduated in 2016. And then, yeah, balanced it up until a year and a half ago.
Yeah, so how did you sustain yourself during those years, right? Did you get individual sponsorship?
For the
in
last
terms of
year
like
and a half.
professionals?
You're
Or
saying,
just brands-wise?
you're saying in the last year and
Yeah,
a half?
yeah.
Honestly, I saved up a lot of, what I made since 2016 to, what was it, like 2023. And I made myself like a long-term kind of, financial plan. This is what I need to save in order to not be working during the next year and a half. And it worked out, but it's not, it took a lot of planning, and it's not easy.
Yeah. Would you say the majority of your teammates on the Olympic team are the same place?
So we have two of my teammates are still in college, so they're younger. They didn't really have that worry. I think whenever you're somebody who graduates from college, that's when those conversations are had. Yeah.
Rob and Eli, let's continue this conversation. What can the media and what can brands do to create this connection point and support for athletes over time beyond them being content creators and the pressure? So Eli, I'll start with you.
Yeah, look, I think the Olympic movement, just like most successful ventures or any venture that we want to get into, depends a lot on awareness. It depends a lot on engagement. Right, a customer base or an audience that you're serving this product to get engaged with the product, to create lift, whether that's for advertisers, audiences, that then by extension gives exposure and distribution to what the athletes are doing on the pitch, field, or whatever the level of competition, wherever it takes place. From a media perspective, in my particular seat where I sat, which was trying to also develop an audience for Spanish language consumption of Olympic Games, it always started at NBC and where with my team with the storytelling and trying to get the stories of the athletes out there for the public to consume and engage with and to resonate with. So I think that what we've seen, especially with the Paris Olympics, is that there's been much more attention placed on how to create more distribution of all events. So for example, Peacock was a destination to find all of the Olympic events, whereas in the past, we were limited in being able to showcase certain things based on hours and things of that nature. Now there's more availability of the content, by extension that allows the athletes to showcase their talents to more audiences. And then the hope is, right, that their stories will resonate and their own efforts will be rewarded in turn with that awareness and with the engagement that the audiences can have with those niche sports. It's not a perfect scenario, to be sure, because as Jackie described, not every athlete is a social influencer. Not every athlete can go up on stage and perform perhaps in that kind of platform. But at the end of the day, as we continue to figure out how to develop Olympic opportunity, it's going to be about more distribution, more awareness, more eyeballs, and more engagement.
Rob, anything
Yeah,
from
I
a
would
brand?
agree with that, but I think it's unfortunate that it seems to be stopping there, that for the Olympic Committee to say, hey, become a content creator and that's how you can generate revenue, I think is misplaced. I think that LA28 and the USOPP has done a good job with the Guild by bringing Guild in and trying to have employment opportunities for athletes. But I also do think there's a little bit with the brands that's being missing, which is that we have early opportunities for people to come and work for us. And that's whether it's the automotive partner, or whether it's us, whether it's the beverage partners. There are partners who have lots of employment opportunities out there that I think we're missing with our athletes, and it's because we haven't really connected those dots yet. So for us, we actually focus less on sports and more on STEM and more on technology. We have a program called the Network Academy, where we have about 35,000 students already in Los Angeles who are part of our program, who are learning how to become employed in the tech fields. And what we're looking forward to, just from Cisco's perspective at least, is over the next couple of years, making sure that everybody's aware of that program and the athletes are aware, because they could become a part of the Net Academy and become trained in being able to go and work in technology fields. So hopefully some of the other brands will do the same thing. I know it is important to the USOPP and the USOPC, so hopefully it'll be a difference for LA28.
If I might, and this is an interesting spectrum of the Olympic movement ecosystem. And I think this is something for all of you to be aware of, is that the United States is the only nation in the world that does not support their governing bodies and their Olympic athletes and their Olympic movement with government funding. We're the only nation in the world that everything we do, from youth sport development all the way up to high performance gold medal competition, has to be privately funded. And that is unique, and it has some great advantages to it: innovation, the collegiate system. There's a significant attention paid to the collegiate system because that's the farm system for the Olympic movement. Without college athletics, you don't have a U.S. Olympic and Paralympic committee. And in fact, Congress has recognized this. They put a commission together that released a report in the spring of this past year. The commission's mandate was the reformation and analysis of youth sport and Olympic sport in the United States. And it made 12 recommendations, some of that involving government support on various levels, but also supporting the governing bodies, because the USOPC and governing bodies, our mandate is to grow youth sport, and our mandate is national team Olympics, high performance world championships. You're competing for resources. Sometimes they compete with each other, but the reality is the more people you put into the system, the better chance you have at high performance athletes. And the USOPC has recognized that we are pay-for-play model in youth sports in America. So many kids don't get an opportunity to actually pick up a saber, pick up a stick, and play whatever sport it might be because it's a pay-for-play model. That has a long-term effect on the impact of high performance. And so we are at this unique moment where we rely on brands as an opportunity, and great. We rely on networks as an opportunity, but our system's a little broken, and it needs some love, frankly.
I'd like to stay with you, Mark. So in the past, you've discussed participation, lifetime value, and customer acquisition. Talk to us about growth of the women's game, and retention in your sport.
Sure, that's one of the unique things is governing bodies, we are technically non-for-profits. But as my treasurer says, non-for-profit is a tax status, not a business model. And so our job is to generate revenue. The more revenue we generate by law as a non-for-profit, we have to put that money back into our mission. And our mission is fuel the growth, enrich the experience, and field the best national teams. From a growth perspective, one of the things that I've brought into our organization is cost per acquisition. The concept, and certainly you know this through your collective businesses, there's work that goes into and data that goes into what does it take to turn a person into a customer, whatever that customer might be. For us, we look at it, what does it take to turn a young person into a lacrosse player? How many times must they interact with the sport? Is that interaction visually, pick up and play, buy a hoodie, watch on TV? Those are interaction moments. There's a cost for that. Where should we invest our money to not only give that child an opportunity to play, but then also stay and having a welcoming pathway to play? And as I said on the upfront, it's a pay-for-play model of youth sports in America. So looking at it through a very business lens, we've actually been able to be very effective. We have actually more 6, 7, and 8-year-old kids playing lacrosse than ever in the history of our sport. And we also know that every 7-year-old today turns into 2 10-year-olds 3 years from now. So the age cohort doubles. And so by looking at that model, just like I've talked to Sarah Hirschland at the USOPC, who's the head of the USOPC, that's a framework that can be replicated in other sports, is that there's a top of the funnel, if you look at it through a very business-centric lens, that actually best practices, cost per retention, you make the right investments, that actually can pay itself off, not only in how youth sports changes communities and young people, but also how it impacts the Olympic movement, again, many years from now. But through that, you can tell how many customers we're going to have, how many streamers we're going to have, because kids who play sport today are more likely to be customers and fans of sport in their adulthood. So the ecosystem works, you just got to play the long game a little bit.
Jackie, anything in fencing to make sports more accessible? And some of the things you're doing to do that, right?
Yeah, so fencing is notoriously, there's a pretty high barrier to entry. It is quite an expensive sport, at least in the United States. And so the question of accessibility is pretty big in the sport, especially as we approach LA 2028. I know that is a major initiative of USA Fencing specifically, is where can we tap into communities where they have not been exposed to fencing. Fencing is primarily an elite sport on the East and the West Coast. That's where we get most of our fencers. And I was, one of those young fencers who did not come from a particularly affluent background, and I was supported by a fencing club that identified that I had talent early on, and was able to train there. I cleaned the fencing club to afford lessons. Like I really, was exposed to having to work really, really hard at a young age. And so the question now as we approach LA 2028 is how do we provide more opportunities for people to learn about the sport of fencing. There are great organizations in the city, organizations like Peter Westbrook, one of my teammates who also won the gold medal with me, and she won a silver individual medal. She comes from that program, and they serve communities who would not otherwise be exposed to the sport, and they get the kids at a young age, and through the program, they raise them, and they have access to the top coaches and training, and Lauren is, my teammate, is a direct fencer from that program. There's also one of my teammates at Columbia, Nzinga Prescott. She also has a nonprofit called Peace that does the same thing in Brooklyn. My fiance and I, so we are opening up our own fencing club in New Jersey, and a question for us that we're figuring out is how do we balance paying the bills for the fencing club, but also providing opportunities for kids to also try fencing, and that's something that we're currently talking about, and it's a topic that's very near and dear to my heart because I do think fencing is such a beautiful sport. It has given me so many opportunities. I would not have been at Columbia were it not for fencing. And so for me, it's a long-term goal to really ensure that more people are able to fence and have programs that are accessible.
If I could just add to your story for a moment, because I absolutely agree that more needs to be done. I think your point on the government aspect of our lack of subsidy, if you will, is a real strong point. And then the engagement with youth is crucial and paramount. But you just told a story to everyone in this room about how you have attacked this challenge in your own individual way. I can't overstate the importance of awareness for these stories and how the awareness factor of what we as an industry can produce and create for this type of storytelling across multiple platforms today can help create opportunity. Now, again, as I said earlier, not everyone's an influencer, but at the same time, today versus the past, more people are engaging with stories than ever before, and they're finding resonant and relatable aspects to those stories that will create an engagement of their own, either as an athlete, a supporter, or a sympathizer in the best possible way. So I think we as a media have to really be focused, not just on obviously the ROI and the P&Ls that we all have to manage in our businesses, but how do we have a lasting impact on the audiences that we're serving up for these opportunities? These were record-breaking numbers that we saw with Paris consumption. I mean, significantly higher, obviously, from the previous Olympics, and Tokyo, for obvious reasons, COVID played into it. But even in spite of that, we saw much more consumption for Olympic events than we have seen in the recent past. And that is an encouraging sign from my perspective for the stories like your own and other athletes who aspire to do what they want to do on the world stage. Now, that being said, we have to support them better. We have to do things like you mentioned, programs that help prepare them for what life is post competition. How can they use their platform and their brand to inspire others to do things in ways that are sustainable? So I'm not saying that there's a magic bullet here on the stage, but I think the more awareness we create for issues like these, the better prepared we will be to address them and find ways to improve them.
Yeah, but I think what you're hearing from us is it's got to be well-rounded.
Agreed.
Right?
Yep.
It's just like marketing or anything else. You have to be able to have a balanced portfolio or a balanced opportunity here. So there are the Alonas of the world who are going to be streaming like crazy and are going to make a living from it. Mm-hmm. But there are others who are not going to do it, whether it's comfort or it's the lack of a story or if it's whatever. So there has to be, I don't look for government support, actually. I grew up a fan of the movement and a fan of actually the way we do it in the US. I like it to be volunteerism based, I guess. But then we have to wrap the other stuff around it too so that we can make it sustainable for everybody.
Couldn't agree more. And it took Alona 2 games before we see the success of where she is today. That was years, not just 4 years. So LA 28 will be a unique games in many ways. It will be Los Angeles' 3rd time hosting the games, following the 1932, 1984, and the first for the Paralympics. It'll be the first US-based summer games since Atlanta 96. With that comes a responsibility not just to deliver excellent games, but to innovate and do something extraordinary. So I'd like to kick it back to you, Rob. What are some of your biggest opportunities to do so?
Well, so currently in a B2B brand role, the opportunities for us are the legacy side of the games. You may have heard they're going to try to have a no cars Olympic in Los Angeles. That remains to be seen and how they're going to do that. But obviously sustainability, modern infrastructure, mass transportation, these are things that the city and the county and the state are really paying attention to. And one reason why LA got the games, right? Because as we saw in Paris, the metro was unlike anything I'd ever seen in Europe because they had gone in and basically renovated it, however you want to describe it. They're going to do the same thing in Los Angeles. What is that going to look like? So as a B2B brand, who's their network partner and who builds infrastructure, that's what we're looking at. How can we leave the legacy, not planting trees, not building playgrounds, that's for others. For us, it's how do we build an infrastructure that's going to be future-proofed and is going to allow LA to be the next great city in the globe, in the world.
Thank you. Eli, same question to you, but how does the media continue to evolve and innovate around the games?
More Snoop Dogg. No, no, I'm just...
Did you get the pin?
No, I did not, but I know about it. No, just kidding aside, I mean, obviously, I mentioned Snoop as a factor because, again, he drew attention to the movement again. I remember being in a stadium in Paris for a U.S. women's soccer game, and when he arrived, I mean, the place stopped. So you can't underestimate the power of entertainment and celebrity in helping to also lift the movement. I think the one thing that we proved in Paris is that we have to make the games available, as I said earlier, to everyone across all platforms at all times of the day. You have to almost oversaturate the marketplace with really fine content produced on different platforms. But I think the other thing too is to try to find resonant ways for it to connect with audiences. I mean, how else can we, if we're not embracing innovation, right? Whether that was the use of AI for replays and highlights and things of that nature that we did, tapping into some new technologies on the graphic side as well to make the games experience very similar to what consumers experience in the day-to-day consumption of their content. And I think we have to work closely with advertisers, frankly, because I think that also helps with the movement. If we can, with advertisers, work on creating integrated content plays that help serve the messaging for all parties collectively, right? The athletes, the advertisers, and us as an entertainment or distribution channel, those are the ways that you can also strengthen the movement. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what they do at Los Angeles 2028. You're absolutely right. The Metro in Paris was something to behold. But I think we're going to have some amazing games and a lot of interest for them, especially because it's at home. And I think because now there's much more resonance with different types of sports and consumption.
Yeah. If I can pile on, I think everybody loved Peacock. Peacock, it was an amazing viewing experience. And having it 24/7 was fantastic for everyone. But if you missed it, pay attention to the innovation that was done in the broadcast because like sailing, if you watch sailing, that was one of the most incredible video images that we came out of Paris with. And Cisco was proud to partner with others. We're a great partner of NBC Sports and have been also since 2012 where we provide a lot of the broadcast technology. But with other partners, we built a private 5G network that was able to take video from the sailboats, from the boats, and bring it back in real time so that they could put the stories together that we loved. And that had never been seen or done before. And it's really hard to watch sailboat racing, right? Yacht racing. But this was really innovative. And I think one of the things we're going to look for in 28 is what's that next jump? What's that next innovative place of broadcast and viewing experience that's going to take place? Because it's going to be hard for you to leapfrog over what you did in Paris. Paris was, I think, an amazing television show, right? It was the best reality show you could ever put on television.
Thank you.
Mark, I mean, what's the next jump for lacrosse in terms of broadcasting and distributing lacrosse?
We're going to put a camera on the ball.
Maybe next, right? Maybe next.
Well, what's interesting for us is that we are, as I said earlier, lacrosse discipline in the Olympics will be sixes. It's 6-on-6. And it's never been done before. It was newly created for the Olympic opportunity. And there's lots of reasons behind that in terms of squad size and things I said earlier around the commercial viability of it. It fits better on a screen, easily more viewed. It's more intuitive to the casual fan. And so the innovation of that discipline itself is part of a tool not only for high performance and Olympic athletes, but it's a tool for youth participation, because youth participation is better done in smaller environments where kids get to touch the ball more often. So this plays into that, but it's also an opportunity to work with partners to create new assets, tell new stories. Creating a sport that is an Olympic sport from scratch has never really been done before at this level, and we're doing it also in tandem with flag. And Lossman talked about with flag, so doing it with USA Football. These are unique moments to innovate around what the athlete experience is, how that translates to the viewing experience for both the fan in stadium, but also those at home. So, you talk about innovation, it's like every day is like a new innovation about how you manage your athletes, how you go to market with that, and how you bring it to your commercial partners to rally around and tell those stories about making an Olympic team that has never existed before.
What's been one of your favorite innovations?
From sixes?
Well, in general.
Well, favorite innovations in terms of where we sit as a sport is the fact that this version of the game is, as I said, very intuitive. It's much like basketball in the sense that for those who know the game of lacrosse, after each goal there's a draw or a face-off. That's eliminated. You pick up the ball and go in the other direction. That is really important because it gets rid of specialization. It also highlights the athleticism of the athletes, and the game is much faster. It's high scoring, and that in and of itself makes the game more commercially viable to a casual fan and to a partner. And commercial viability is at the core of our ability to not only be successful to where we are today as a sport, but to grow the sport. And so I love the idea of creating a sport from scratch and things that make the game faster, like what baseball has done. We talked about that innovation. Those things work. Today's consumer want a fast-paced, easily viewable, easily shareable experience that I can go into a stadium or watch on TV, see it in an hour. If I don't know the game, I can watch it intuitively and understand it, cheer for one team or another, cheer for one athlete or another, and then I'm good.
Eli, what do consumers want? So building on this, what do consumers want?
They want to be moved. They really, time is so precious these days. And so in order to break through the clutter and to really have them engage with what you're trying to present to them, you need to make sure that it has impact, that it moves them in one way or another, and it's not just a passive experience. A lot of times when I would speak to our talent, they knew that there wasn't anyone in the studio with them, but I would tell them, when you perform, you have to have a conversation with the audience. You're not longer speaking to them, you're speaking with them. So our big priority is making sure that whatever it is that we are putting on the air, or however we're presenting it, is done so in a way that really tries to cut through emotionally with the consumer and the audience so that they can connect with it and engage with it longer and want to come back. Because again, in this disruption of consumption, that era that we live in, the experiences and the meaning behind those experiences are the one thing that keeps people coming back.
Jackie, anything to add as you're hearing their perspectives from their view of the Olympic Games?
No, it's very interesting to get this perspective. These are, as an athlete at the Olympics, you're just thinking about going out there and performing. You're aware of all these things that are comprised of the movement, but just to hear it from your perspectives, it's very fascinating.
Wonderful. So LA, we mentioned earlier, it's going to be in the US, and it's going to be hosting the Paralympic Games for the first time. What opportunities does this present for media, brands, and NGBs as we've seen the Paralympic movement grow? So maybe Rob, Eli, we'll start with you.
Well, I'm hoping that, so if Paris was the parity games, I'm hoping that LA actually gets to the reality of having this be the inclusive games. Personally, our brand ambassadors in Paris certainly included Paralympic athletes, but I don't think we did what we should have done to promote and to support the Paralympics. It's really hard the way that it's set up with the 3-week break and all that to keep the momentum going. I think LA has to figure that out. I think brands and NGBs have to be a part of that. How do we continue the momentum from the Olympic Games itself, from the main games? But I think Los Angeles is going to lean in that direction. I think we're going to see some differences in LA 28 than we've ever seen before in terms of being able to truly engage with the Paralympic Games and not just have it be broadcast and hope that somebody finds it.
Exactly. I agree. I mean, from my perspective, my personal view on the matter is that you've got to find a way to integrate both the Paralympics and the Olympics to some extent. I thought the break between the two was too long, to be frank. And I think at that point, you're almost saying to the audience, you know, this is done. We also got this as perhaps, a consolation. And I don't think that's what the intention was at all. But I think if we integrate it more, we can then strengthen both movements by demonstrating, right, how collectively together they're moving people, right? Because anyone who connected with the Paralympic Games, as I did, was super impressed with what it took to also compete at the highest level and on the world stage, regardless of the challenges that they had in their own personal lives, which a lot of the athletes from the Olympics also have personal challenges. So we're all the same. I think it should have just, we have to find a way, I should say, to integrate them more, make them more proximate to one another, and more awareness within the marketing space. I will say, and I think I mentioned this to LJ at one point, I did notice brands and advertisers making a point of integrating Paralympians as well into their messaging, and I thought that was fantastic. Because again, you'll hear it again, awareness, right? The more awareness we can create for these great stories, the better it will be for them.
Rob,
It's a start.
To start.
Right, it's a start. It felt like 20 years ago with women's sports, to be honest.
is there anything that changes from Cisco's perspective from Paralympics to Olympics?
No, actually it doesn't, because we still play the same role, right? In Los Angeles, we're the network partner. In Paris, we had network collaboration, which you'll know our brand is WebEx, and also cybersecurity. So for us, it was just as important to keep those games safe during the Olympic Games as it was the Paralympic Games. For us, it was just as important to have the network stable and secure and steady for the Paralympic, right? It was just as important for us to support our broadcast partner and the presentation. So it doesn't change at all for us. What changed was just the focus and our ability to get people to focus on Paralympics. And I go back with Eli. You just can't stop for 3 weeks. It's somehow, even if we have to, because the playing field changes, they need time to change the playing field, right? To have things different for the athletes. There has to be a way to integrate it, and maybe it's through broadcast. Maybe we'll see more Paralympics talking during the Olympic Games and vice versa in the future.
Are you saying less Snoop?
You can't get less. Well, you can't get more Snoop, actually. You can't get less Snoop.
Jackie, can you share a poignant moment for you from the 24 games? We all want to hear more. I mean, the gold medal, tell us.
Yeah, obviously that was the highlight, to be able to, so we fenced Italy in the finals. Italy has always been our biggest rival. They're historically viewed as the #1 team, and we had beaten them 3 times prior, but never at a major championship event. So never a world championships, and we had lost in the bronze medal match to them in Tokyo, which is pretty painful. So to do it in Paris at the Grand Palais with tens of thousands of people, it was a sold out venue because fencing is very big in France. And so that was one of the first sports that actually sold out their tickets. And to be able to beat them at the highest level was, I mean, it's tough to put into words. All that hard work came to fruition, and it was really special to be able to do it with the team. I think in the 3 years leading up into Paris, we really tackled this challenge with professionalism. We had a new team, so we had 2 new members, and they are young. There was a 9-year age difference between myself and Lee Kiefer, who's my teammate, and the 2 younger ones in college. And we integrated them beautifully, and it was like a symphony. Like when people ask what it felt like to win, everyone was working towards the same goal, and it was just perfect moment. But other than that, I was able to get tickets to the men's basketball finals, and so that was so cool. I was sitting right next to the tunnel, so I was able to like high five all the players, and LeBron James high fived me, so I was like geeking out. Yeah, that was a really cool moment. And then Snoop was just everywhere. Like it got to the point where seeing him was not even that cool anymore. We were just like, at one point I was like, oh, Snoop, like, are you coming to watch fencing? Like, we were just speaking so casually to each other, like long lost friends. So he's great, and I think it was really genius the way that he was integrated into the Olympics. I mean, he did a really fantastic job, and he's a really cool, humble guy. Like, he's as cool as he is on camera as in person.
Your story has everyone here smiling and everyone out there smiling, and it's a lot of the reason why we do what we do. And so you are powering all of us up here. So thank you for that, and thanks for sharing your experience. We will have a student question, so why don't I get to that now, and I can go back to some of mine. But we have a question from one of our sports management student, Ariel Huang. The Olympics today clearly faces challenges around sustainability, brand continuity, and profitability. How can the upcoming Los Angeles Games build on the success and innovations of the 1984 Olympics? Do you have any insights from your professional standpoint? I see some head nods. You want to go, Mark?
Sure, I'll give it a run. What's interesting about that question is, it relates back to your very first question, is what the IOC and LA 28 was looking for when they take an opportunity. And let me back up. So the local organizing committee that runs the games, in this case LA 28, has the opportunity, but not the mandate, to add additional sports to the program that drive local relevance, legacy, et cetera. So that's when you saw sports like sport climbing, surfing, skateboarding, breaking make it into the Olympics. That local group that runs the Olympics has the right, not the obligation, to do that. In the case of LA 28, they added lacrosse, squash, baseball, softball, flag football, and
T20 cricket.
T20 cricket. And the things that they look at are carbon footprint, logistics, cost, as I said, commercial viability, gender equitable, are the best athletes that play that sport competing at the Olympic level. So all of the things in that question around sustainability, cost structure, are the things that they actually do look at. So the alignment, for an example, between what it takes to put on a sixes game in lacrosse and flag football actually match up in terms of squad size, field size, the likely number of attendance that you might have. It's gender equitable. So there was great thought that goes into what is the physical footprint, logistics, and cost structure that it's going to take to put on the Olympics in LA. And so these things that I do think are challenged at the Olympic movement are being course corrected by looking at the Winter Olympics are going to be probably Salt Lake City and like 2 or 3 other international destinations, and you're going to go on a rotation. I would venture to say, and you guys probably know this better than me, that the Summer Games are going to be on a very similar mode where you're actually going to go from a 5 to 6 city rotation over a period of time, because LA does not need to build any new facilities. They have dorm facilities in UCLA and USC. They have tons of indoor facilities, tons of outdoor facilities. That's the model moving forward. It's not building an entire city, an Olympic Village from scratch anymore. That's just not sustainable. So I think the IOC, LA 28, they're addressing those things. And you look at what happened in Paris is another perfect example. They used the infrastructure that was in place, and the talent, the venue sometimes is the talent. And I think when you looked in your situation, the venues were the talent. It was unbelievable visuals. That's going to be the model moving forward.
Not just because she's here, fencing was the top event to attend. It was unbelievable when they came out on the balconies to be introduced. It was like, you're kidding me. I don't know what it's going to do for the sport going forward, but that was one of the best experiences that I personally had in Paris. But I can look at it at different lenses. I think it's really interesting. I don't know if the students here, but I think it's really interesting. We're talking about 1984 still, right? That's the legacy of the 84 games, is we're still looking at the 84 games. It changed the Olympic movement. It changed everything. I think what we're going into in LA is going to be so different, except for the expectation of the legacy, right? The 84 games, Atlanta to some extent, but the 84 games taught us how to make money, taught us how to leave a legacy, taught us how to keep the revenue and support youth sports when the games left. There were so many things that were first in LA. And I think it's on Casey and the general and everybody else to like really look at that and say, what will our legacy be this time? Because it's a big shadow that 84 puts over on 28.
Yeah, just to add to the question that the student posed, I think all of those pillars can be strengthened or developed through three main areas. I think will, right? The will to want to improve those areas and to develop those movements. Rob used the word earlier, focus, the focus on those particular pillars as well. And then accountability. Because, as a media outlet, without going into too much detail, we had a partnership with a particular organization that, for example, sustainability was a priority for them, not just in their own execution, but in how we broadcasted and executed the event as well. And so there was this, collective accountability between our organizations to make sure we were actually walking the walk. So I think when organizations embrace these things with will, focus, and accountability, then you're going to see some of those movements moving towards more stabilization, right? But if we just mention them, post-Olympics or as a talking point prior to getting ready for the Olympics, it will never get to a place where it needs to.
Jackie, anything to add?
No, I think
That's okay. That's okay. Let's go back to, we have time for just about one more from you. What's a story that's not told? So, Mark, we'll start with you. What's a story that's not told with lacrosse?
It's interesting. I saw this earlier, and I was trying to prepare for this. And I think the story that's not told for lacrosse is just, it isn't told yet. That creating a discipline from scratch, entering the Olympic Games in LA 28 for the first time in hundreds of years on the men's side, and 100 years on the men's side rather, and the first time for the women is we're writing our story in real time. And that, when you talk about making connections with people, visibility, opportunity, it's a really exciting moment. So I think the story that's not told is the story we're living each day. We have 40 men and 40 women in Indianapolis as we speak right now in Olympic development mode with some friendlies against Great Britain, Puerto Rico, and Colombia. Never been done before. That's a story we're going to figure out. I'm flying to Indianapolis when I leave here and going to see that unfold in real time. And so that to me is really exciting because we're writing the story as we live it.
Rob, for a B2B brand, what's a story that's not told?
I won't go to the brand side if that's all right.
That's all right.
I think so we're in the industry. So we get Jackie's story, and we get that the Olympics are privately funded. I don't think the general public understands it as well as they need to. I think the story that's not told, like when I grew up in this business, we called Olympic sports in college non-revenue generating sports. That's what they're called. So yeah, we got a problem. It's broken, right? We've got the majority of Olympic sports that are non-revenue producing sports the other 3.5 years. So I think the story that's not told, that still needs to be told, is to put a bigger spotlight on the athletes, the challenge of the athletes, the fact that somebody has to clean the venue in order to be able to afford to practice there. I still think that story needs to be told, and needs to be told in such a way that it moves the public to be able to give and to support these athletes and teams.
Yeah.
For me, the story that's not really told, maybe not a glamorous one, is really how much work is put into broadcasting these games and making them available to the general audience. Olympic preparations literally are nonstop. So while you're actually working on Paris, you're working on Milano. When you're working on Milano, you're working on LA 28. And then the thousands upon thousands of people that work on it in different ways to make sure that the experience is the one that you get back on the opposite end. And the fact that they do it not just because it's a job, but because stories like Jackie's and the other athletes and all that they put into it, we see it as a real true sense of responsibility to honor the commitment of the athletes so that the audiences can connect with it. So I'm just really enamored with the team back home and at NBC and the team at Telemundo and all of the work they put into it in the years prior to make sure that these stories are told.
Jackie.
Yeah, I would say, from my perspective, fencing being one of those more niche sports, just to continue, we get coverage maybe about 4 or 5 months, right, leading up into the games. There's that general excitement. Some maybe a month or two afterwards, if you medal, maybe a little bit longer. But just, understanding that the athletes live in like 4-year chunks, right, essentially. And so what is the remainder of the 3.5 years? What does that look like? How can we continue to tell the athletes' narratives and continue to support them, I think is something that needs to be considered.
Well, thank you to our panelists for their insights and experience and sharing them with us today.